Hello people of the internet, this is KaijuNoir here with my review for Godzilla, the Planet Eater, the final installment in this experimental series of animated films from Toho and Polygon Pictures. Now, if you've been following my channel for the last year, you probably already know that I'm not a fan of the first two installments for multiple reasons. For those joining us, I've criticized both Planet of the Monsters and City on the Edge of Battle in the past for their slow pacing, uninteresting two-dimensional characters, bland and lifeless environments, endless streams of expository and pseudo-philosophical dialogue, and lackluster CG animation. The only enjoyment I've gotten from the series so far are the unique concepts the filmmakers developed for this incarnation of the Godzilla universe. Such ideas include Godzilla having a plant-like appearance, the humans fighting Godzilla in a post-apocalyptic Earth inhabited by monsters and new humanoid creatures, humanity teaming up with aliens that result in clashing ideologies, and Mechagodzilla being composed of continuously growing liquid metal. Unfortunately, the actual execution of these cool ideas leaves a lot to be desired, as the end results have left me bored out of my mind. So going into Godzilla the Planet Eater, my expectations were already very low, though a part of me was hoping for a slightly more exciting plot given that this film is clearly meant to act as the climax to a 3-act story. How did it fare? Well, let's dig in. Our story begins with the aftermath of the ending to City on the Edge of Battle. Godzilla's asleep, Mechagodzilla's city is destroyed, the Bilosoluto teammates and Yuko are dead, and the remaining team has taken shelter once again in the Hotoa's bizarrely empty home. Meanwhile in space, the rest of the humans and aliens overhear what took place in Mechagodzilla City, with the head of the Bilosolutos enraged that Haruo betrayed his people and destroyed the only means of killing Godzilla, while the humans believe that he made the right choice. With the humans both in space and on Earth in a state of panic and desperation, the Exifs calm them down by telling them that God will save them all if they all join their religion. This results in the Exifs executing their plan to use the humans as a sacrifice to bring Ghidorah, their god, to Earth. With every living being on Earth under the threat of the Golden Terror, it's up to Haruo to put a stop to the Exifs' scheme, even if it means confronting his closest friend, Metphes. Right off the bat, I want to say that the Planet Eater is by far the best in the trilogy, though that's not saying much given that the plot actually progresses here, whereas the first film was setup and the second film was excess padding. It felt like the bulk of the emotional weight for the story was reserved for this film. It is here where we get to see Haruo dealing with the consequences of his actions, and the guilt he suffers for all the people who died along the way. It's also here where we finally get a chance to see the Hotoa and humans interact with each other a little bit more, especially in the case of Miyana, who starts to feel like her own character as opposed to simply being the nice twin. Even Godzilla is a bit more interesting this time around, since he's actually proactive for once as he takes a stand against Ghidorah, this mysterious invader that has come to wreck all life on Earth. The standout character though is hands down Metphes, especially when the whole film focuses mostly on him. From the get-go, he's been the anime trilogy's best character, mainly for being such a mysterious individual who's always lurking in the background. While there was no doubt that he had some hidden agenda this whole time, the way it was executed in this film was very well done. I was glad to see that the filmmakers took their best creation and used him to the fullest extent by having him drive the plot forward towards its natural, if somewhat predictable, conclusion. The downside for this story is that you can clearly tell that this whole film was a 30 or 40 minute climax that was stretched to an hour and a half. Despite the film's intense and character-driven moments, there were other moments of padding, where characters are either sitting or standing around in an empty room to give exposition on information that doesn't add anything new to either our characters or the world. On top of that, there was a major moment of character development that sorta came out of nowhere and felt very rushed. Even the climactic battle between Godzilla and Ghidorah was problematic to an extent, as it too felt artificially prolonged. Multiple times we would see the two monsters struggle, then the human characters would comment on what's going on, before we cut to Haruo and Metphes' confrontation. This cycle repeated for what felt like 20 minutes. It's sure to annoy audiences, especially when the fight between Godzilla and Ghidorah isn't really all that exciting, as you can tell by the trailers. However, every moment with Metphes was engaging for me, so I wasn't bothered by the climax that much, since I was entertained by what was going on with our characters, more so than with the monsters. Speaking of the monsters, I suppose I can talk about Ghidorah for a bit, since he's really our only other giant monster to make a physical appearance in this series. In the past, the filmmakers have been very reserved with the use of monsters for reasons I'll go into in a sec. It seems obvious that Toho provided Polygon Pictures with a limited budget, what with so many textures, character models, and backgrounds getting reused in all three films. Even Mechagodzilla was relegated to nothing more than an array of domes and pipes. Here, I feel like they made an interesting compromise for Ghidorah, where its design is recognizably him, while simple enough for it to be animation friendly. I especially like the faces, which look disturbing and truly alien-like, with its multiple eyes and jagged mouths. Much like with City on the Edge of Battle, I will warn you though that you won't be seeing Ghidorah's full body outside of that one shot where it's all in shadow. Now that probably would have broken the animation budget. When it comes to balancing the story's drama and action, this is where I gotta commend the filmmakers for once. Their intent from the beginning was to create a story where the characters are the main focus, with all the monster elements relegated to the background. This was most likely done for budgetary reasons, since we learned in a recent interview that Toho did not allow this project to have monster battles. To further emphasize this, Toho hired a director who further enforced this approach, especially in the case of Mechagodzilla. Unfortunately, I personally felt like they failed to deliver an engaging human story up to this point, leaving me unsatisfied for 2/3 of the trilogy. However, with the Planet Eater, I felt like I was finally seeing what the crew was envisioning all along, since we got to the point where the human drama was interesting enough to act as a replacement for the monster action. Though having to take 3 films for a plot to start getting good leads me to believe that the filmmakers had this grand idea to make a large story with multiple twists and turns in a monster-infested world. However, when Toho provided strict limits on what they could or couldn't do, they had to greatly cut back on their story, leaving them with a reduced plot that they now had to stretch to cover 3 films. However, that's just my theory though. I don't know if the filmmakers chose to keep their original story, or if they were unable to change it at the last minute, but in the end, I felt like there just wasn't enough narrative content for a trilogy of feature-length films. Had this been only 1 or 2 movies, or even a 4 to 6 episode miniseries, then both the plot progression and character development would have flowed a lot more naturally. Though in the end, we're left with a clunky series of animated films with some neat concepts that had the potential to be so much more, even within the confines of the filmmakers' limited resources. As for The Planet Eater, it serves as an okay conclusion that's worth watching, especially if you've already invested time and energy into the first 2 films. Even if you weren't a fan of Planet of the Monsters and City on the Edge of Battle, like I was, you'll still find quite a bit of entertainment here due to the handling of the film's main hero and villain. The action itself is okay, but I totally understand if you're left disappointed, since Toho once again made the monsters the focus of the marketing when they themselves didn't want them to be the focus of the story. Overall, I give Godzilla the Planet Eater a 3 out of 5. Now, when it comes to the trilogy as a whole, I'll mainly recommend giving it a watch to only the most diehard of Godzilla fans, since the overall quality of the films couldn't live up to the overambitiousness of the vision the filmmakers had. That and the ideas presented in these 3 films have been done much better in other forms of media. The only thing unique about the trilogy is the novelty that these concepts are being associated with the King of the Monsters himself. And even for some, such as myself, that novelty factor alone won't be enough. With that said, thank you very much everybody for joining me today. Tune in a couple months to hear my full spoiler thoughts with kaiju novelist Matthew Denian when the film gets its international Netflix release. If you'd like to know my thoughts on the previous 2 films, I've provided the necessary links in the description below. Until next time everybody, take care.